Well, using like the basketball metaphor, like as a coach, as a former coach, hopefully I want to get back into when the kids are older, but coaching
Right.
a player, like, there's, you could watch film all night, all day. You could, looking at tendencies and this and that. And I had a lot of fun with it, but it's also something that, is for single men and men without kids, or people without
Right.
kids.
Yeah.
There's this idea of like maybe losing some of the fun because just like some of the, I don't know, yeah, the fun of basketball because you're watching, you're looking for the granular things. I wonder if the same thing as an editor where, looking over other people's work, which, is great, and you see so many diamonds in the rough and so many great ones, but also if it kind of takes away from like just the joy of writing.
Yeah, I think it could for sure. I will say that being an editor has made my writing 1,000 times better,
Mm,
just because you're seeing so many ways that people are trying to do different things, and you really get to kind of calcify like what you think works and doesn't work, for
mm-hmm.
better or worse. Like it's my own subjective opinion, but it is something that I bring back to my own work. If I'm like, oh, this didn't quite work for somebody else in that story, I would try something different maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that, I think, like basketball, is a feel and muscle memory in a lot
Right.
of ways. But I will tell you, like, if I'm editing really heavy on a day, the chance that I'm going to write my own work that day is slim, because I'm stuck in that editing brain, and so therefore I don't let enough go. I don't let enough get on the page before I start to edit. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
pretty editing type writer as it is. I will write, and if I get stopped on a word, I will wait until I find the word that I want. Um,
Nice.
and that doesn't really mess me up too much in a lot of ways because I'm writing flash. If I was writing longer work, and I think this is why I struggle with writing a novel. I've tried to write a couple and have not gotten past page 110 usually,
Mm.
um, because I am so like micromanaging the
Mm-hmm.
line, and I'm staying with the line, staying with the character. It's almost like method acting in a lot of ways. I'm not an actor myself, but I try to think and filter through that character as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can kind of edit on the page. But yeah, like I said, to get back to your regular question, there are days when you're just editing too much or you're reading too much of other people's work, that you're just too critical to get back to that
Makes
kind of
sense.
joy on the page. And I like
Sure.
to have fun and joy, and I love to figure out the mystery or the puzzle of the characters. And when I'm not feeling like that, then the writing doesn't usually go very well, and it means I'm too inside my editing brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it can kind of take away from that. When I was in undergrad and even in grad school, some of my favorite writers were also teachers of creative writing, and I didn't understand why it took 10 years to write a novel, their next book. And now I get it, because they're giving so much of their creative energy in a lot of ways to the teaching. And I'm sure they love it just the way I do. Like, I love breaking down stories. I love seeing how stories work, from sentence level to character level to other elements. It's just something I love. I don't know why. It'd be easier not to and just write my stuff and go back and revise. But I really, that's one of the reasons I love teaching Flash as well. It's just because I love breaking down stories and showing other people what I found valuable in the stories and the ways that they can use that.
Hmm.
But it can be a hard thing to switch out of that brain of teacher editor.
Yeah.
And so I can go months. Like, I don't write every day by any means, nor do I think you have to be. There's this whole thing of like you have to write every day to be a writer, but like you're a writer. Like if you write, you're a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I could go 4 or 5 months, but it's all percolating. And I
Right.
think that's one of the hardest things for me. I've been writing, let's say, since 2005, right? It's what, 17 years or so, if my math is right. Is patience, and being patient enough to allow myself to have those dips and inspiration and creativity and come back and hope that, once the next thing that you write is going to be great. And if it's not, write something else.
Sure.
Like I said, I don't get to the free throw line as much as I would like to, but that's the way I like to think of it when I'm in an actual free writing thing. It's just, here's another layup, here's another free
Yeah.
throw, unguarded.
Right.
It's my practice kind of way. If it works out, like, great. But I am still struggling with the patience of that for sure. There are
Hmm.
days when I just want to go out there and be Steph Curry and hit half court shots, right? Like, I want everything to go in. I want every line to be perfect. I want the plot to just sing for me, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you gotta you gotta be willing to dig in for as long as you can, and then back away and come back later.
in one of the interviews with Megan Giddings, great writer
Yeah.
herself, you said, quote, I write Flash because brevity brings clarity for me, and that makes sense from what you said.
Mm.
I think this was a different interview. You said the question might have been the same one. The question was, what's your writerly life jacket, character or plot? And
Yeah.
you picked choice C. You said neither. It's time.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I think I might change in some ways. My life jacket, I think, is usually character.
Yeah.
It's usually, and I think you said something about my opening lines, which I thank you so much. I work really hard on opening lines, but usually inside my head before they come to the page.
Yeah.
If I get that opening line, then I'm off to the races. If I don't get
Mm.
an opening line, a lot of times that's what kind of stymies me from completing a story. And usually that character is involved. I love putting character, point of view, setting, and conflict all in the first sentence if I can. I
Mm.
challenge anyone that I teach to try to write Flash in that way too. It's not the only way to open a story. It's not the only way to write Flash, but
Right.
you give the reader so much to hang on to. Uh, and we're all suffering from attention as it is, and we've got so many things that we could do or be doing. So to really
Mm.
get them into the story and let them know that it's going to be worth their time, you got to get them intrigued and also grounded at the same time. And I think that's it's difficult, but that's what I try to do.
Yeah, you're talking about like, some of those first lines, and this one's really short, but it really packs a punch. And I'm just interested too about how like your titles can bleed into I guess vice versa, maybe like the first line bleeds into the title or vice versa. It's
Yeah,
called You've Stopped, and then the first line is You've stopped asking me to marry you.
yeah,
I
and
think
I
finally this
think
is a good thing.
right, yeah. So that story, you stopped, just kept repeating in my head over and over and over again until I had something to go with it, and like I instantly made story and character from that opening, and I just got lucky that it reverberated enough to the point where I was like, oh, this is it, and we're off. What do we do with two people that have said this or have stopped saying this? Like, where are they, and all that kind of stuff. And it's one of my favorite stories. I actually shouldn't probably say this, but I wrote that in 30 minutes. And the only thing we changed is just a little bit at the end once I got it accepted by the publisher, Pithead Chapel, and then it went on to be in best small fictions and best micro, which was just a complete joy for me, for a Flash writer, to be included in those anthologies that I just
Right.
even when I'm not in them, it's just great. I live for them. I'm so glad that our form, Flash and Micro,
Mm.
is getting represented out to the world in that way.
Well, yeah, the I won't spoil the ending then, because the ending is so good. I wanted to share it, but you talked earlier about like dialogue is, I guess, de-emphasized.
A lot of times in Flash, if you would just scan a whole bunch of Flash stories, you will see a lack of dialogue.
Mhm.
I think just because it's moving so quickly,
Yeah.
and you only get so much space to kind of reveal character. And to be honest, for a lot of writers, I think, and I don't want to talk for everyone, but dialogue is a hard thing to do. I love dialogue. It's one of my favorite things to write, but it is very difficult to do because you're trying to do so much with dialogue. It's not just, character reveal, but it's also like character reveal, it's plot, it's irony, it's moving the story forward, but it's also kind of hiding some of the characteristics from each other. It's not real life dialogue by any means. Like, it's the best of movie dialogue in some ways. And that's one of my favorite things to do is, like, in a normal book or maybe even a movie, there might be 10 lines of dialogue before the dialogue you get from my story, but I'm only giving you that 11th line. And I have to somehow do that in my head. And sometimes it works consciously, sometimes it's subconsciously. I think I might have cut you off because I'm not quite sure what the question was going to be about dialogue, but just the fact that, like, it is kind of rare in Flash, unless some people try to do all dialogue stories, but that can kind of get murky because you
Mhm.
don't really have a sense of like where these people are when they're talking to each other. Um,
No,
but
you
yeah,
definitely
that
went with my train of thought for sure. I maybe it seems like most, if not all, of your work that I've read, you don't necessarily use quotation marks. Is that related to flash fiction or not necessarily?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, obviously, like Cormac McCarthy, I think is the most famous person of like not using
Mm.
dialogue tags, and I used to hate when writers wouldn't use them either. But I think in a longer work, it is more bothersome not to. But in a shorter work, it's almost creating an atmosphere of a crucible or of a squishing in, right? Like
Oh,
you want the
okay.
reader to be so sucked in to the language. I think it's also part of like it's a blending of narrator and character in some ways. I think it works on that level as well, where you're like, is it from the narrator, is it from the character? It doesn't matter because they're so close together. At least that's the way
Mm.
I try to write it when I write dialogue, especially dialogue without tags. Or it's just like it keeps me in the story. Every time I have to go and put quotation marks, I'm now thinking about the actual mechanics of the writing in some ways. Some of the time, just it's just kind of coming off the top of my head now. It's a
Yeah.
feel. It's a complete feel thing for me
Uh-huh.
when I'm in the middle of the story, whether it's getting quotation marks or whether it's not. And a lot of it has to do with clarity for the reader, but also like what do I want them to feel as they're reading this story? I kind of want them to feel like I'm feeling as I'm writing it, which is that like I am stuck in this moment and we're in it until we're not.
Hmm. Well, dang. Well, yeah, the desired effect definitely comes through. I remember kind of I think I still have it somewhere, you know, in all the electronic files. I wrote a story that I was really proud of. I think it's got, you know, still has potential. It's probably been
Yeah,
20 years since I wrote it or something. It's like I think it's still got potential.
there you go. Yeah.
You know, probably I don't know, 700 words. Just for the storyline. I think the storyline is really interesting, but I remember and it's like, oh man, it hurt. I got the rejection letter back. One of the few that I got back that had some, you know, some
Right.
feedback, and it was some to the effect of, and I'm sure that thing's been long thrown away. I'd love to see that letter again, but it was some of the effect of like, you know, a lot of professors, a lot of teachers will say you don't use dialogue to start off a story, and this is exhibit A of why not.
Oh, wow, that's harsh.
You
I do agree with that
know?
sentiment.
Yeah.
Not about your story because I haven't read it. And I do think there are stories that do work with dialogue in
Mhm.
the opening, but my argument is that like you haven't given us a context for where the people are speaking, and we're so used to movies. A lot of movies start with dialogue because we've got
Yeah.
all the stuff in the background that our brain is
Sure.
picking up on that
Sure.
we're not giving the reader, and so therefore you're kind of in a void when you do that on the page.
Yeah.
Um, or we just don't know enough about where the point of view is coming, and the point of view usually comes so much later after the dialogue
Okay.
that like I want to know whose perspective is things being filtered through. So again, it's not like a bad thing by any means. A lot of genre novels
Mhm.
start with dialogue, and I'm always like, okay, but like where are we? Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that they think like you read the back of the book, so you know kind of where we're starting, and they're taking that for granted.
Hmm.
And I feel like we deserve, like our reader deserves to be grounded in the actual time and place,
Right.
at least
Right.
a little bit, unless you know that's the whole point of the story is that you're not going to be grounded. And
Mm.
some mysteries obviously are
Hmm.
like that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Dang it, you make a darn good point. Dang it. So I'm gonna have to stop. I'm gonna have to stop throwing darts at my little poster of that critic. Yeah.
well, and there's usually some sentence in there that's just after the dialogue that you could move to the front
Yeah.
and then go with the dialogue,
Right.
and we're so much more grounded.
Agreed.
And therefore, I think again, you don't want anything to kick the reader out of the story. But I will say that you being upset about that, a lot of writers are like that. I get a lot of stories in the submission queue that start with dialogue, and they obviously don't probably know that that's like a pet peeve
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
necessarily, but you're not the only one. Like there's lots and lots
Right.
of people that have
Right.
done it, and I would always just suggest like, what's that next line or two, and what if we started there? Or
Hmm.
now that you've written your story and you know it so much better, why don't you give me that first line that kind of gives me a setup of the grounding and of the point of view and the character, and then the dialogue, and
Yes.
I think it'll work.
Oh,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. That I like I said, I don't think I have a copy yet. I'm searching. I'll probably search after we're done here, but definitely it was a lot of dialogue too. It wasn't like one key line and then into the action. It was a
right.
lot. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm overdoing it. I'm not upset about it. I've moved on.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, there's lots of
There
stories still to be written, or a lot of
you
stories
go.
you've already written, right? That
Yes.
help us move on from. Trust me, I've got a lot of dustbin things that didn't quite get past, the first 100 words or anything.
A great, powerful opening line is from Past Lives. Quote, our 4-year-old tells stories, usually unprompted, about his old house, this former life he had before he was with us. Dang. What is this
Yeah,
former life? I'm thinking, is this
yeah,
a literal former life? Is this an adoption? Is this we are talking past lives, reincarnation? I'd love it it might be a good time. I don't know if you would like to read that, Past
I would
Lives.
love to. Yeah. I don't think I brought it up though.
Okay.
Let's see real quick. I think I can find it real quick. But yeah,
And
I'd
this
love to read
is
that.
this is one of at least three of the stories that I'll make sure that the readers have as part of the notes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can.
Let's see here. And I should say something about this story is actually a lot of my stories have like ribbons of like real life. And my son, he really did this in a lot of ways.
Wow. Yeah.
He would yeah, he would talk about his past life and this barn that he used to live with his old mom and his old dad, and like it really freaks my wife
Oh,
out. Me too, really. For
yeah,
her
reasonably
especially.
so. Oh,
Um,
man.
this idea of like, well, did he like and he it was not a joke. You know what I mean? Like it was just like
Mm.
part of his consciousness in some way, somehow, and I'm not really sure. And I don't necessarily believe necessarily that we lead all these other lives, but
Hmm.
uh, it hit me enough to try to write the story. So I have it
Wow.
pulled up. Would you like me to go ahead and start reading?
Please.
Okay. This Past Lives, this was published by Atlas and Alice. Our 4-year-old tells stories, usually unprompted, about his old house, this former life he had before he was with us. He lived on a farm on a country road with John Deere tractors. The deer with the sprig of whitetails gathered at the edge of the woods, and he would watch them with his old parents, the ones before. My wife and I huddle in our bed, elbows and knees connected like the intertwined roots of trees, a mass of skin and bone. We investigate the corners of our room, flinching as the house settles into its midnight dreams. These stories can't be real, right? She asked. I'm tempted to contact a forensic artist. The detail is so creepy, I say.
Hmm.
Did you, she asked, curling her head into my shoulder, have any previous lives? You think he got it from me? I can't even remember yesterday. I flick off the light and we lay there in silence, listening to the house contracting around us, waiting for the dreams about farms to take us under for the night. When I'm alone with my son, scaling the play structure at the park by the lake, seagulls combing the beach for dropped Cheetos, I ask him about this previous life. I'd like to know if these other parents, this ghost father, is a better parent than me. Did he buy you ice cream? Did he take you to the park? Did he dry you off with the soft towels after a bath? The answers come like heartbeats. No, no, no. The question I want to ask, but can't. A wave lapping in and onto the sand, leaving bits of seaweed, fish scales, and filaments of oil from jet skis and motorboats. Did they love you more? That's it.
Dang, it got cold in this room all of a sudden.
Right? Yeah. It's like
Man,
my only like real
dude,
ghost story I've ever written, but
dude.
it comes from all the fears of, being a parent in general anyway. Um and just wondering like, are you good enough? Are you doing good enough? And then we have this added
Yeah.
layer of him talking about these these old parents.
Yes. Oh man, the soft towels, not just the towels, the soft towels,
Yeah. The
right?
the details they matter, right? They reveal
Mhm.
and make characters, unique and specific. And I think that's one of the harder things it is to do in Flash. It's like there's this theory that all stories have been told, right? In some ways. I don't know if I
Mhm.
believe that necessarily, but I
Mm.
do believe that not all characters have been created or revealed on the page of a story yet. And so I think that is our in as writers. Like, even if you think
Mm.
all stories have been written, the characters have not. And that's your job as a writer
Yes.
to bring these new and fresh and unique people to us. And it's really the small details that build characters that are unique and specific, but also universal, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, the ending would have been powerful enough if the father did ask that question, did they love you more? That still, you know, brings those shivers, those chills at will, and then but it's the one that he doesn't want to ask, that he wants to ask but can't.
Yeah.
Right. Again, that unsaid, that
And he's just not, yeah, he's not, there's a chance for a shift and change there, but he just
hmm.
can't get there yet. Yeah.
Right.
He's in limbo.
The collection of I think 8 or 9 stories is special, like the people on TV.
Yeah. That's my first
Right.
chapbook. I also have another chapbook called Covenant by ELJ Editions. And then I have a full Flash collection called Hollows from Alternating Current Press
Uh-huh.
that just came out here in March.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. The some of the reviews of one of the first one talks about that, childlessness was a through line kind of in the collection.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of like the what's left unsaid. We've talked a lot about that. I mean, that reminds me again of Hemingway and like the famous what Hills Like White Elephants.
Hmm.
Which so much of that story is what's not being said.
It's all the iceberg theory that he kind
Hmm.
of proposed or whatever, and it's all kind of under there, and they don't really say it.
Right.
It really is an amazing story. That does so well with dialogue, and has this kind of objective camera that he's famous for, except for this, couple moments that get a
Sure.
little subjective, but that's
Right.
his power. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, it's a great story. Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, like a lot of writers, I write about the things that I was afraid of, and I think as a young married person, um, trying to conceive, and that was for the things like I really wanted kids, my wife really wanted kids, and
Mhm.
there was a little bit of a struggle, but nothing that a lot of people had went through by any means. But it did portray itself on the page,
Right.
in a lot of ways. And I don't know that I write about that as much. I have a daughter and a son now.
Mhm.
And so I don't think I write about that as much as I do writing about like fatherhood and taking care of kids, or from the kids' point of view and looking at fathers and those kind of things. So I
Yeah.
do think we more, stuff that we write about more some, but there is always those like, for whatever reason, with these basic fears that we grow up with, and everyone is kind of unique in that. And as a writer, I think that's just what's come out from me. Like John Irving writes about all the same kind of things, just in different kind of stories. I don't know
Hmm.
that I'm that direct in the things that I'm writing about, but a lot of times that's, yeah, you'll see stuff keep cropping back up because we're all just struggling to name this thing that's unnameable.
Hmm. Do you can you like trace like a lot of your life or some of your life through like from the 2014 chapbook to Hollows? Like the review online talks about in Hollows, you reveal the crawl spaces and attics of American families, the places we dread and the places we yearn for. Fathers and sons, a lot of more about
Yeah.
like I said about fatherhood, and therefore,
Yeah.
can you trace like I guess even like I mean, do you feel like you're objectively a better writer or just a different
I
writer?
hope so. No, I hope so. I hope that yeah. I think that there's still some merit in that first chapbook and in some of those stories. In fact, some of those, I think a couple of them even made it into Hollows just because I really love them.
Okay, yeah.
I think Baby Alone made it into both. Just because, and I wrote that one early as far as the like 2011 maybe or something.
Mhm.
So I do think in a lot of ways, hopefully I'm getting better. At revealing character, at forming plot, at staying in the perspective of the characters and those kind of things. And my sentences are better and smoother and all those kind of things. But each story is different, right? It brings its own challenges each time you start with that opening line or that opening image, to see if it's going to take you to the place that you're hoping it takes you to.
Hmm.
And then I think in the first chapbook, I was relying on something I would call like a cut ending, which is just that I would leave you right after the climax and hope that you knew enough about the characters in the situation to kind of extrapolate into the white space as a
Sure.
reader of like, oh, here where they're going. And I think hopefully in the stories that I still do that occasionally because I do think it's a cool effect, and I do think it's one of the powers of Flash to kind of
Hmm.
just leave a reader hanging, hopefully not in a punchline or jokey way,
Right.
um, but in a way that like makes them think afterwards. And I still hope that I'm doing that for sure. But I do think I'm giving my characters a little bit more room to breathe and act, and to contemplate why they're doing the things that they're doing. Just because, like, I my childhood, my dad was an alcoholic, and so in a lot of ways, like my father son stories is all about trying to like untangle that in some ways, and not
Hmm.
necessarily in a therapeutic way, but just trying to look at it from as many angles as possible. One of the reasons I love writing is I get to live a million lives, and I
Yes.
get to pull on whatever life I want to live. Just a lot of them do happen to deal with fathers and sons and that kind of circle of things. And then as I became my own, a father, and how I wanted to do that and how things are different and those kind of things, and just puzzling out like, is it better? Is it not better? So I
Mm.
do think that there is a progression
Mm-hmm.
hopefully not only in just the writing, hopefully I'm getting, like I just already said it, but like getting closer to naming the unnameable, right? I hope I'm getting better at that and not leaving the reader so adrift. But then there are times that I'm like really challenging myself to like not add context in some ways and
Mm.
really let the reader kind of live and dig around and things. And I think you do hopefully have to find your readers that want to go along with you to do that, where you're like, well, he's not going to give us all the answers, and he's really just going to pose a lot of questions, and I may get to the end and still and not feel like I quite got to the end, and is that okay? So I've
Mm.
been playing around with some of that as well, but also trying to, give stories really solid endings as well. Like I said, we talked about me having trouble with patience, and I think a lot of writers have trouble with patience in the sense that like they want to get it written, they want to get it out to readers. Like I feel better when I know someone's reading something that I've written.
Yeah.
I'm a really introverted person in a lot of ways, but for whatever reason, I want this connection between me and the reader, and I want it's the same connection that I want with other writers. Like I'll read
Yeah.
something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll just think the person's amazing just because the story was amazing in a lot of ways. And so I'm always, I think, striving towards that in some way.
We talk about a connection. One of the many 5-star reviews online says, quote, reading Hollows, I felt like I was on an unsettling tour of young Midwesterners who have been left behind. In many cases, left behind by untimely death, cracked open with grief and left to find a way through. Rather than being morbid or violent for shock value, the writer provides a shimmering window into lives. I felt connected rather than put off. This is just my kind of thing, and I loved it.
Wow, that's a really nice review. In a lot of ways, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm pushing to the edge. My new work in progress flash collection, I think I've got about 75 pages of it so far, and I
Mm.
probably need 130, 140, 150,
Mm-hmm.
is dealing with those moments of like right before violence or maybe right after violence. And like, how do we deal with those kind of things? I haven't really experienced all that myself, but I'm really intrigued by it and intrigued by what people would do before or after kind of those things. And like, how do you pick yourself back up? How do you put your life back together? How do you change or shift from a thing or a moment that you didn't want or ask for in a lot of ways? And I think Hollows deals with that in some ways too, is like when we get into these situations that we didn't necessarily ask for, are we going to come out better or different? And is different better or is it worse? And so it's a really nice review because that's exactly what I'm hoping to do. Like I'm not here to shock people or make people feel bad, but I do think a lot of us are intrigued by the little violences that we commit against each other in families. Like not even like I'm not even talking about like actual weapons or anything, but just with our actions, with our words, and all those kind of things can add up into little traumas. And how do characters deal with them, and how do they move on, or how does it affect their lives later? And so for that reader, like I'm just so honored that like we connected, right? Like that's what I was trying to do. And I don't even know that I could have put that into words, but they
Mm,
they put it into words for me.
they did. Definitely connected, and many did with Baby Alone, which you said has kind of lasted over the years, made into the most recent. I love maybe to end by if you wouldn't mind reading Baby Alone, part of it or all of it, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I think I got it pulled up here. So this was published by the Watershed Review quite a while ago. This story um, started kind of just by like I was in a parking lot, sitting in a car, looking across, and just wondering like, what if I had to get out of my car and do something or affect something or help
Mm-hmm.
someone? Um, and so here we go. I should mention too that it is in first person point of view, but it is from a female point
Right.
of view, which I tend to write in a lot as well, just
Mm.
to kind of distance from myself, I think, in some ways. So here we go. Baby alone. There was a baby alone in a car across the parking lot aisle. I can't quite make out its face or its gender. I concentrate on the flash of red fabric, which I assume is its arm closed, clasped in a shimmering coat. It's much too cold for a baby to be alone in a car. I tell this to myself as though there are a set of perfect conditions where a mother or father might be allowed to leave their child. An infant almost from the look of its tiny fingers in a parked car in the parking lot of one of the largest shopping centers in town. My own car is running, the slight mumble of my husband's talk radio station turned down low, competing with the shudder of the engine. We're here for a pregnancy test. an argument he won, because like I told him, I'm familiar enough with my own body to know if I was pregnant or not. He kept pointing to the logic, a counting of days since my last period, as if that was enough to convince me and my uterus not to bleed. Right or wrong, I agreed to go with him to the store, but told him that was as far as I would go. The rest was up to him. It was your time, dime, or your dime, I told him. He gave me a look. He hated when I fell into the pulpy sayings of my father. When you've been married 7 years, sometimes that's all you need to communicate. Leave the keys, I said, as he unbuckled too quickly, the metal striking the window. The sound stilled the air. Can I get you anything else? He asked. I was tempted to ask for a bottle of wine. We needed after the failed test, but I didn't want to push the issue. He hated when I was right as much as I hated when it snowed. It looked like we would both end up losers tonight. When I didn't answer, he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, a cute gesture, like we were still dating, and I couldn't help but smile. He opened the door, and the cab filled with the smell of fried food. The cold air made the outdated air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror damp. I watched him walk away as soon as I thought he was out of earshot. I started the car and prayed. We had enough gas to keep it running. I was too afraid to look at the gas gauge. There were a lot of things I was afraid to look at these days. I sat in the heat watching people brace themselves against the cold. I spent several minutes watching a woman in a thin jacket with a short dress, legs covered in tights, walk backwards. She got me thinking about my husband again. I wondered if that's how he saw me, a frail and huddled bird. The woman shrank between two SUVs, the largest one's lights flashing as she unlocked the vehicle. That's when I saw the tiny movements from the car across the aisle. At first, I wasn't sure I'd seen anything, especially with the way the sun was setting over the ridge of the supermarket roof and the way the shadows were starting to roll in like fog. But there it was again, like a flutter of a hummingbird's wing. I turned down the heat and the radio as if I could hear the movement from the car, a car rattling down the lane passed between us, blocking my vision. I craned my neck to the left and then to the right, my cheek resting against the window. As far as I could tell, there was no one else in the car, certainly no adults in the front seats and no other children in the back. Minutes passed in that state of anxiety where you know you need to make a choice. I played with the heater, turning it up and down, trying to focus all my thoughts on the rush of the air from the vents. I punched at the radio buttons until my neck began to itch. There was that feeling you get when you wish you could just walk away into another life, the lives you're allowed other people to lead for you. When I get to the car, I expect to see the baby crying, but it quietly looks at me and I wonder what it's trying to tell me. The baby is a boy with a shock of light brown hair spilling out of a slanting toboggan hat. He looks away from me and I tap on the glass. He smiles, flails his arm, and gurgles something at me in baby speak. The wind is at my back, roiling over the back of my legs, chilling the back of my knees. I try the handle, wondering why it's taking me so long to do it in the first place. The handle clicks, but the door doesn't open. Small miracles, I whisper toward the glass, and it thaws. The baby wags its head, trying to look around the condensation as if I'm something worth seeing. People drift by, pushing their rattling shopping carts, the wind picking up their voices and the rippling of the plastic shopping bags. Where's your mother? I say to the window. I wonder where my husband is and worry that he'll return to the running car and I'll be gone. Another mystery played out in the shopping center parking lot. Then it hits me, as sure as I am that I'm not pregnant. I know that I locked the keys in the car. I turn to look at the idling, a soft spool of exhaust drifting over the trunk and into the darkening night. Do you want me to keep going? My husband isn't at the car and he's not jogging down the aisle either. He always runs when it's cold outside, though I point out to him that this only makes it colder. He always chooses a shorter yet more intense experience over a longer, mellow encounter with the troubles of this life. I wonder too, is this how he sees our marriage? An element to endure by sprinting through the milestones until there isn't anything left? I don't flag down any other shoppers. I'm not sure what I could say to them, and I'd rather not get anyone else involved. So I wait in the cold, my toes going numb, knowing that one of two things will happen. Either my husband will return carrying a single plastic bag with a smiley face winking on the front, or the baby's mother will creep cautiously up to the car. Both promise a confrontation, and I don't know if I can handle either one. It's bad enough leaving a dog alone in a car in this weather, but a baby is just too much. It's the kind of story you see on the news. The thought of cameras being interviewed on live TV makes me hope that my husband will return first. He'll be angry I left the car. He's always worried about my safety, as though the minute I leave the apartment, someone will attack me. Tonight he'll cite the temperature, tell me he is worried I'll catch a cold or pneumonia. He's big on pneumonia for some reason. The entire time he'll be looking at my stomach, but won't mention the word baby. I guess we've both grown superstitious over the last year. Will we, won't we, is not a popular game in our home. Maybe I want to tell him it's not happening because our bodies don't think we're ready. He'd call that psychological bullshit. I'd call it an excuse I'd made up to make myself feel better. I'm not sure why he won't let me lie to myself. That, I want to tell him, makes me human. I
That's
decide then.
I'm sorry. I thought maybe right there would be a good spot.
Yep, sure, that works.
That confrontation that you have coming up is so good, so interesting. You said there's gonna be a confrontation with either of two people, and there are no despicable characters in that story. Even the last character introduced,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's empathy or at least sympathy for everyone involved. There's so much that goes on, and just whatever the distance is between those two cars. Just masterfully done.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. Even reading it today, I'm like, ooh, this is not quite Flash. It's definitely a little longer than
It
Flash.
is.
And I would probably revise a bit just to move things a little quicker. But I still do appreciate your comments. I do think it is a story that, for me, as my own writer, does hold up for what I'm hoping to do.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's like I said, there's, like you said, there's universal in there, but also so much that's specific to that story, to that parking lot, to that couple. Um, and thanks again. Thanks so much for just enlightening us on Flash versus short shorts, and really just sharing what goes into your mind. And I'm just so impressed at how much encyclopedic knowledge, if that's the word, encyclopedic knowledge you have of the form, and just how well you do it. So thanks so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's my passion. It's the thing I love for whatever reason. Like, this is the writing I love. We all geek out for something, and this is what I geek
Yes.
out for.
Yes, and I love that you're a hoops fan. You have that basketball
Yeah.
and baseball history as well, and just look forward to what's coming up. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure today to speak to Tommy Dean. Continued good luck to him with his writing. So looking forward to continue to follow his career and his important work. Thanks for listening to this episode 152 with Tommy Dean. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple and leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa. Find it on Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube. Please subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the podcast while you're checking out this episode. Please, Tommy, I'm always bad at this. Please share any social media info, where to buy the books, if there's any special
Sure.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, Twitter still exists. By the time that people
Yeah.
listen to this, I'm at Tommy Dean Writer on Twitter. I spend a lot of time there. I love to connect with writers and readers and
Nice.
people that are submitting to the journal and people that love Flash. I also have a website, which is TommyDeanWriter.com. So those are probably the two best places to find me.
Okay.
Hollows to be purchased on Amazon, if that's your thing. They'll ship it to you fast. Or at Alternating Current Press is where you can find that. And then again, I do have that other chapbook, Covenants, which is at ELJ Editions, which you can find on their website as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I'll definitely will share all that info with the episode notes. Sign up now for the Chills at Will podcast Patreon. It can be found at patreon.com/Chills at Will podcast Peter Real. And my last name is RIEHL. Check out the page that describes the benefits of a Patreon membership, including cool swag and bonus episodes. Thanks in advance for supporting my one-man show, my DIY podcast, and my extensive reading, research, editing, and promoting to keep this independent podcast pumping out high-quality content. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down, and the other song played on the episode was Hoops, instrumental by Matt Whitehour. Both songs are used through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for episode 153 with Luivette Resto, a mother, teacher, poet, and Wonder Woman fanatic born in Aguas Buenas, Puerto Rico, and proudly raised in the Bronx. A Canto Mundo and Macondo Fellow and Pushcart Prize nominee, she is on the board of directors for Women Who Submit. And that episode will air on November 22nd. For now, thanks again for listening. I hope